This is the Etsy Conversations podcast, and I'm your host, Ijama. I thank you for joining me for another episode. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be re-airing some episodes that I did way back in the beginning. And so if you're a new member of the community and you haven't had a chance to listen to these and they've fallen off iTunes, this is a great way for you to catch up with some Etsy shop sellers that you might not have met through the podcast because it's been a while since we had our conversation. And the very first one I'm going to replay for you is Muddy Waters Ceramic Creations. And this is an Etsy shop that was run by Diane. And it's actually Muddy Waters CC if you're looking for it on Etsy. And I'm going to link to that shop again. I spoke with Diane way back in 2014, and she sells hand-thrown ceramics and pottery. And she had been doing it for a while and was at the time selling on Etsy, and she still is, which is great because like I said, her episode aired, this was episode 4 of the podcast, and it aired in January of 2014. So Diane shared lots of great information. I think a lot of it is still very relevant today. And so I hope you enjoy this conversation. And here we go. Hi there. If you're listening to the podcast, then I assume you're either a maker, a blogger, or you run a creative business. And if so, I'd like you to join me for a conference that's coming up next year. It's the Craftcation Conference. It's held once a year, and it's a 4-day conference that features over 80 hands-on DIY craft workshops, business classes, and social events. It's held from April 27th to the 30th, or it will be held from April 27th to the 30th of 2017 in Ventura, California. Now, Craftcation is a conference that's put on by Delilah Snell and Nicole Stevenson, and you might remember I've had them on the podcast. They're the ladies behind Dear Handmade Life, and I had them on the podcast in February of 2016, and that's episode 116. If you'd like to listen to our conversation and just learn more about them, please do go back and listen to that episode. And we also talk about the Craftcation Conference in that episode as well. At Craftcation, what you get are skills that you'll need to start your business if you haven't already, or if you have a business already, take that business to the next level. You'll make longtime friends at the conference and also build your community and support system. It's also a good way to just get together with the creative community and discover or rediscover the inner artist and crafter inside you. Again, Craftcation happens only just once a year, and every year it does sell out. I believe there are about 400 people that attend the conference. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's not too big and not too small, but it does sell out. So if you're planning for your conferences for the next year and you're trying to decide which ones you want to attend, I would recommend Craftcation. Again, it's 4 days. It's going to be on the beach, so that's kind of a bonus. And it's specifically designed for creative business owners. You can learn more about this conference at dearhandmadelife.com. If you choose to go, I do have a discount code for anyone who listens to this podcast. You can get $20 off your Craftcation tickets, and that's if you use promo code Etsy Convo. Again, that's dearhandmadelife.com. Get $20 off your registration if you use the promo code Etsy Convo. But go over to dearhandmadelife.com to learn a bit more about it and listen to episode 116 where I talk to Delilah and Nicole. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Here's the episode.
Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama. And today I have with me Diane. Diane is the shop owner of Muddy Waters CC, or Muddy Waters Ceramic Creations, on Etsy. You can find it under Muddy Waters CC, and I'll put the links in today's show notes. Hi, Diane.
Hi, my name is Diane Waters, and I've been working with hand-thrown ceramics and pottery for about 5-6 years now. I began by taking a class at a local pottery supply store with a friend of mine, and basically what's kept me going for all this time has been the challenge of it. When I very first started, it was so hard and I was so bad at it that I was determined to get good. And since then, I've learned that, there's always something new to experiment with. It's very creative and fun. There are new techniques to try, and it just kind of keeps me going. In the time that I've been on Etsy, I have met a lot of really great people and a lot of creative people, and it's been kind of fun. People from around the world.
Oh, good. Thanks, Diane. Now, Diane joined Etsy. She opened her shop in January of 2012. So she's been on there for, it's going on 2 years. It'll be your 2-year anniversary in the next month. So congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
Diane has over 150 sales and 5-star reviews, 46 5-star reviews thus far, and she has over 1,400 admirers. So you're definitely doing something right.
Good.
So one of the new things I'm doing is asking a trivia question, and Diane picked animals. So are you ready for your question, Diane?
I am.
Okay. Which of the following animals was never a resident of the White House? Your options are an alligator, a bobcat, an ostrich, or a pygmy hippo.
Oh, my goodness. I guess an alligator?
Oh, believe it or not, it's an ostrich.
An ostrich, okay.
Yeah, I know. I would think they would have had an ostrich. Those seem nice and elegant for the, the front lawn.
Uh-huh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, okay, good deal. All right, so Diane, you said you first started making pottery about 6 years ago, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and when did you first discover Etsy?
Well, probably about 3 or 4 months before I actually started my own shop. A guy that I worked with told me that a family member of his was selling jewelry on Etsy. He said, you ought to check it out. Basically, before that time, I wasn't really selling anything. I was, giving a lot of pottery away to family, friends, coworkers. And then some of my coworkers said, well, let me give you a little something for it to at least cover your costs. And so that's about all I was doing. But when my coworkers suggested that I check out Etsy, I just started kind of cruising around and looking and seeing what other kinds of things were on Etsy. And it got me interested, but it took me a while before I jumped in.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny because most Etsy shop owners start off making, because everyone is so creative, they're making things and you can't use everything you make. So they're giving them away for free till someone eventually says, you can actually sell this stuff. You don't. And welcome to Etsy. So you make mugs, you make bowls, you make trinket jars, teapots, you make a wide variety of things. How do you decide what you want to create?
Well, I'm not a pre-planner like a lot of people might be. I might decide that, I feel like making a tea set today, but that's about as much planning as I do. So, I'll cut off my hunk of clay and I'll get it ready and that kind of thing. And then it just kind of evolves on the wheel. And then I look at the shape and how things are turning out. And sometimes I might decide I'm making a teapot, but it really evolves into something else. But I look at the shape of it and I go, that needs, a little bird handle on it or whatever. I don't necessarily pre-plan that. It's just how it looks. In fact, just recently I made a vase and I looked at it and I went, that kind of looks like a pineapple. So I'm glazing it now to look like a pineapple vase.
Oh,
We'll see
interesting.
how that turns out.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is anything you create, did it start out as one thing, turn into a mistake, and then end up as something else?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. And in fact, a lot of times when things flop, you overextend, you get overzealous with the clay and it starts to collapse on itself. Sometimes I will make those into kind of more free-form things and raku them or something else. I'm a thrifty kind of person, I think, by nature. And so I don't want to waste that clay, even though you can, reuse it.
Right.
But I try to save everything. And my husband's always teasing me about that. He's always saying, they're not children. You can throw them away.
I feel you, though. Yeah, I hate to throw stuff away. Now, you said you raku things. Can you explain what that process is? What is raku?
Well, raku, it has its origins in Japan, but I think it's very different. Western raku is very different. Basically, it's a process where you apply different kinds of glazes to a piece of pottery, and then you place it into a kiln to heat it up to a certain temperature. And it's usually a pretty low temperature in kiln terms, only about 1900 degrees.
Whoa.
Then when it's nice and hot, glowing white or yellow, you pull it out of the kiln with a pair of tongs, metal tongs, and you place it into like a garbage can, some kind of a metal container with flammable material in it. So it might be newspapers, shreds, or, just shredded paper. Could put leaves or other flammable materials in there. Basically, when that hot piece of pottery hits that flammable material, it bursts into flames.
Mm.
And then put the lid on the garbage can to cut off the oxygen. So basically, the flame eats up all of the oxygen, and it creates like what's called a reduction chamber. It reduces the oxygen, and it creates different kinds of effects. So, for instance, a lot of the raku pieces that I have on my site have metallic glazes. They have a lot of copper and that sort of thing in them. And when the oxygen is taken out of that chamber, you'll see a lot of these brilliant red colors and other colors, and some of it is affected by the flame actually on the piece of pottery. So you'll see, different colors just wending through depending on how the flame hits it and the reduction of the oxygen and that sort of thing. There's also a different kind of raku glaze, which is a crackle glaze. And you'll see some of those. Those are usually white crackle, or sometimes you can paint underneath it. It's actually a clear glaze. In that case, you don't take it immediately from the kiln and put it into the other chamber yet. You have to let it cool a little bit so that the glaze actually cracks. And then when you place it into the reduction chamber, it smokes, all of that flammable material smokes, and the smoke causes the black to go into the cracks and that kind of thing. So it's the carbon is being trapped in those gaps.
Wow. I'm looking at the vases you have in your raku section, and I see what you're talking about, and they just look so gorgeous. It's amazing how you get those designs. Some of them look like they just happened, like they're natural, that like you said, wherever the fire hits, and they look really good. And then I see that some of them you actually have painted on designs on them.
Mm-hmm. Usually those are the white crackle ones that you see underneath the actual glaze. Yeah.
Nice.
The thing about raku, though, is it is not functional. So, you can't drink out of it or eat out of it. It is just mainly for the beauty of it. It originated in Japan. And so in Japan, they have some pretty interesting ideas about what artistic beauty is. And so, having something that is just for the purpose of being beautiful is kind of a Japanese ideal.
Huh. Well, it is beautiful. And I actually was going to ask if you can make raku mugs and raku dishes, but I guess not. Unless they're just going to be decorative pieces.
Yes.
Do they tend to be bigger pieces like the vases you make, or can you make them different sizes?
Well, I do make them a little bit different sizes. I'm kind of limited to smaller pieces just because of the weight of the clay and that kind of thing. Like the instructor that I had when I very first started, he would make these super tall, huge pieces, and I've always admired that. But most of the tallest pieces that I have are probably, I don't know, maybe about 12 inches or so at the most, just because, if you take anything over about 5 pounds for me, it's kind of difficult to work with it and pull it up and keep it from flopping, basically.
Right. And then also, I guess, does it matter the size of the kiln that you use?
Yeah, I have several different kilns, and the one that I use for, glazing and that sort of thing is 27 inches across. And I don't know, it's 3 rings high, I think. So you probably could get a piece in there that's maybe about 2 feet tall. There are other kilns that they do have available that you can add rings and make it taller, but I don't have anything that large.
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you. I was so curious about that. So, Diane, do you have a family? I know you mentioned your husband kid you about not throwing anything away. Do you have a big family?
I don't have a big family. It's basically my husband and I have a teenage daughter.
Okay. So how do you manage your time?
Well, most of my life is chaos. It seems like we're always rushing. My daughter and my husband both have no sense of time at all. In the morning, I'm like a drill sergeant. Come on, let's get moving, move, 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 that kind of thing. And It seems like everything's always at the last second and rushed. But I don't know. Just make it work.
Yeah.
This is something that I do for me more than anything. It's, how I can kind of escape from all of the hectic, regular, everyday life stuff.
Right. So you found like a nice happy balance for your Etsy and your creative side with everything else going on.
Yes.
Good. It's kind of a release for you, I guess. A lot of Etsy shop sellers say that because you're doing your craft, you're doing something you enjoy doing anyway.
Yes, yeah. It is. And so basically I'll take my little iPad into the living room at night. And while I'm glazing things, while they're drying, I will, do things on Etsy, do some of the stuff that I do to promote and, working with the teams and so on that I'm involved with.
Oh, good. Okay, we'll talk about that too. Is your shop profitable?
Is my shop what?
Profitable.
Oh, profitable. Maybe a little bit. I wouldn't say that I'm not going to be able to quit my day job. Let's put it that way. I try to keep my prices pretty reasonable. So, I want this to be something that is accessible to a lot of people, So rather than charging $100 for a single teapot, as some people do, and I'm not saying that is wrong. It's well worth the effort and the time and all of their years of experience. But rather than that, I would rather make, a tea set that maybe somebody can afford to buy for their mother or their friend or whatever, and so that it's more accessible. So right now, there is a little bit of profit in there, but it's not enough to earn a living off of.
Right. And your prices are very reasonable. I have to mention that. So what inspires you to create?
Well, a lot of things, really. I mean, I have a lot of animals, actually. I have 3 dogs and 3 cats.
Wow.
And so pardon me?
Do they all get along?
Yeah, sometimes. I've got two male cats that'll sit there and, eyeball each other and growl and stuff. But it's like, come on, you guys. You know each other for 10 years. You can't get along? But for the most part, they get along pretty well. And so well, I don't know if it's all the pieces that I have on my shop, but I have like little jars that I've made with little sculptures of my cats and dogs on them. And I've got some pieces that are dogs or some pieces that are cats that I've made and put onto Etsy as well. But I also like to do, leaves and kind of more natural kinds of designs on things too. And I have a decent sized backyard, and I have a lot of trees in my backyard. So, I have plenty of nature to look at and be inspired by.
Oh, nice. So what keeps you motivated to keep your store open?
Well, it's just, I enjoy making the pottery. I enjoy working with the clay. And so, when I do get unmotivated, my husband helps a lot.
Nice.
He says, "Oh, who cares if you make any money or not? You like doing it, right?" So that's part of my motivation. And so and it's like, yeah, you're right. So I just keep making it, and I just keep putting it on there, and some pieces sit there for a really long time. And then all of a sudden, something that has gotten no attention at all, somebody will just buy it. So I guess sometimes it's just waiting for the right person.
Right. Yes, I think so. Sometimes the owner hasn't seen it yet, is how I like to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you spend time looking at other Etsy shops that sell items similar to yours? About how much time do you spend looking at what other people are doing in a similar space to yours?
When I first started off, I spent a lot of time looking at what other people were doing, similar kinds of products and such. But not so much anymore. Now I'm involved in my teams and things like that. And so I'm looking at other types of, work and doing other kinds of, activities related to the teams. And although I do have many other ceramic shops favorited, so I see when their new stuff comes out and that kind of thing. And I certainly do admire their work. I'm not trying to copy anybody else's work or, price my stuff similar to their stuff or I don't really necessarily feel like I'm competing with them because they do what they do and I do what I do. And as I mentioned earlier, most of my stuff just kind of evolves organically anyway. So it's not like I'm setting out to compete with somebody in particular.
Yeah, and I think that's the good thing about Handmade is no two people are really ever going to make exactly the same thing, exactly the same way. So,
Right.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned teams a couple of times. Can you tell me about the teams that you belong to? How do you decide what teams you want to join, and how much time do you spend interacting in your teams?
Well, at first when I first started with Etsy, I knew nothing about it. So the first teams that I joined were basically through invitation. They invited me to come join them, and so I did because I didn't really understand the importance of being on a team. But since then, there are a few that I have gone out of my way to join for various reasons. So I have some teams that I belong to that focus on treasuries, and I make a lot of treasuries. It's an easy way to promote yourself kind of indirectly because basically you're promoting other people, and sometimes they'll turn around and look at your work, or sometimes they will turn around and make a treasury including your work.
Yes.
And it's kind of a nice positive way to do it, I think. But I've got other teams that I belong to that, they do different kinds of web promotion and that sort of thing. So, I have a variety of different types of teams that I belong to for a variety of different reasons. And so one of the ones more recently that I joined is the Handmade by Me, because of kind of that backlash when Etsy changed their policy and allowed outside manufacturing, that sort of thing. A lot of people were really upset about it because they felt like, hey, now we're competing with the factories, that sort of thing. And so this team kind of was created kind of so that we can all work together. And I thought, hey, that's a great idea, even though I don't necessarily feel that I'm competing with, people who are using outside manufacturing. I don't think it's maybe quite so easy to do with what I do as it might be with other kinds of crafts. But then, I belong to some that are, primarily focused on vintage, even though my work isn't really vintage. Or I belong to teams that have kind of a wide variety of different types of shops in them. But it's fun because, through these teams, I've met a lot of people. I've met people from Italy, from Canada, from, Vermont or New Hampshire, Florida, just all over the country and even outside of the country. And it's been really fun.
Yeah, I really enjoy the Etsy teams, and I'm glad you mentioned them because I think they're a really good way to get plugged into the Etsy community. I feel like I say this all the time, but the Etsy community is different from other online selling venues in that you get a lot more support from other sellers than you would in other venues just because everyone is doing something unique. So I think the general feeling there is it's harder to compete because I know you're not going to make an item that's exactly like mine, and there's just a lot more help there.
Yeah. And even still, as I mentioned, some of these, I know that there are teams that are specifically focused on a certain kind of craft or certain localities or things like that. But most of the teams I'm on tend to be more diverse. So some people might be making hair clips and others jewelry and other people quilts and other people stained glass or, what have you, and vintage shops thrown in there in the mix. So you're not really competing because you're all doing different things.
Yeah. And it's nice to talk to people who do different crafts because you get different points of view about different things. Like with shipping is one thing, but then, that's a whole other animal on its own.
Oh.
Now, have you had any bad experiences on Etsy?
I haven't really had any bad experiences. Only one time. A couple of things have broken in transit. I try really, really, really hard to wrap everything very, very well, but even still, things break. And so I've felt horrible. I've replaced the item. I've gone out of my way to make it a good experience for the customers. And I haven't had any bad reviews as a result of that. But I did have one person who bought a tea set and gave it to his girlfriend and then said, it didn't work out. Can I return it? It was like 60. Yeah, I know. It was like 60 days later or something like that. And I went, sure, because I just thought, I don't want a bad experience out there.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, once I got it back, I relisted and it sold. Okay. So I wasn't out anything, but that's probably the worst experience I've had. Yeah. And that wasn't so terrible.
Well, now I'm curious. What didn't work out? The tea set didn't work out or the relationship didn't work out? Did he tell you?
He didn't tell me, but I assume it was probably the relationship. Either that or maybe he bought it thinking his girlfriend would like it and she went, ugh. I don't know.
That's funny. Yeah, but I think sometimes it's just easier to, just for the sake of one, letting the customer have a good experience shopping with you so that they'll come back, is take things back. Don't. If somebody doesn't want it, they don't want it. It's just easier to say, fine, send it back. I'll give you back the money. Because in the vast majority of the time, that happens very rarely.
Yeah.
Usually, if somebody picks a handmade item that they see on Etsy, they want it.
That's true. And in fact, even ones that, I guess I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And so I'll see something go, ooh, there's a flaw there that I didn't realize was there. And oh my God, I hope they don't think it's awful. And, and nobody has ever said anything. So.
Yeah. So I'm actually curious now, the the other item that was returned before, or that broke, and then you sent another one, because these are all unique and one of a kind. Um, I know it's only happened once, but is there a concern that someone might say, well, it's not exactly like the one that was in the picture. I liked how this one swirled on the left side and this one doesn't have that swirl there.
That hasn't happened so far, but it's happened more than once. I've had, I think, 3 different items break. One of them was a piggy bank, and the ear broke. And so I just said, pick a different piggy bank.
Okay.
And they picked a different, I mean, there wasn't one that was just like that one. So it was like a polka dotted piggy bank, and they got a purple one. Okay. So, that was easy. In one case, it was actually a custom item, and it was going to a teammate of mine and a friend of mine who lives in Canada. Mm-hmm. So I basically, it arrived, and one of the handles, it was a cream and sugar. One of the handles broke. And fortunately, because it was a custom item, I had made 2 sets. So usually when I do custom items, I'll make extra just in case something happens, because one thing about ceramics is there are many different steps along the way where things can go bad. So it might blow up in the kiln when you're bisque firing it, or it might crack or something like that. So, if I'm doing a custom item, I'll usually make 2 or 3 of those things to ensure that at the end there's, at least one good one. And so in this case, I had made 2 cream and sugar sets, and the one broke. I replaced it with the whole second cream and sugar set. And she was very happy about the whole thing. And I insure my packages too, because as I said, things can break in transit despite your best effort.
Yeah. Oh, that's smart. I didn't think about that, but always just having a second backup, especially for the custom orders.
Yes. And they're not identical, even still.
Even then, right. Yeah. I think that's just a given in the handmade world. And that's part of the nice thing about handmade is nobody's going to have the exact same thing. But then if you really like that one that you had and something happens to it, then that's it.
Yes.
So how would you say selling on Etsy or Etsy in general has changed your life?
Well, I have an outlet for my creativity now. I have a way of, getting some of the stuff out of my house, which is already quite crowded with pottery. So that's a good thing. And then, as I've mentioned, I have met a lot of people and interacted with a lot of people. And, on Facebook, on Etsy, in the teams, in different areas. And it has been really great to have similar like-minded people out there who understand me, because, in other social settings, at work or whatever, they don't want to listen to me talk about pottery all the time.
Yes, I know. Oh, good. So how do you promote your Etsy shop?
Well, I am on Facebook and Pinterest and Twitter and, all of those various social media out there, or at least some of them. I'm, not a digital native because I am 50. So, some of this is new to me. I'm learning about it. I don't have a blog and I don't have my own web page, although eventually I'll probably try to figure those things out. But So it's, through the teams, through some of these other social medias and that kind of thing mostly, and a lot of word of mouth too, I would say. A lot of people, so if you follow other people's shops, then they see, or you see all of their favorites and all of the things that they're looking at. And so, by following other shops and then following you, it kind of spreads the word a little bit, and that's just through Etsy.
Yeah. Are you very active on your Facebook page and on Twitter, the social media that you use?
Well, Twitter, not as much. I don't know what to say. I'm not part of this really oversharing generation. So I don't have things to say about everything all the time. And a lot of it does tend to be just this listing or this treasury, come take a look. And maybe I could do a better job of that. But on Facebook, I try to either, post new pictures as things are coming up. I try to talk about, some of the things that I'm working on. So like, for instance, recently my husband bought me an extruder, and I saw in a magazine making flutes. So I really wanted to try that out, and I made my flutes on that. And so I made just a mention of that. I don't know how well they work, but I plan on raccooing them, and they'll look cool anyway, hanging on the wall or something, even if they don't work real well. But, those kinds of things, I'll just kind of post, oh, I'm trying this out, or, oh, I finally get to run my kiln load. So a lot of it isn't always exciting stuff, and maybe I should do more kinds of posting, more diverse, but, I'm kind of at a loss as to how to do that and what to do. So
I know.
Any kind of advice you can give.
Yeah, social media, it is time consuming. It does take effort. I'm learning it too. I'm not a pro or anything. But one of the things I've noticed, because I follow some people who sell on Etsy, and I'm going to go and find you and follow you, is for the most part, everyone is just posting their listings, new items that they've listed and what have you, which is good. You want people to go and look at what you're selling. But I like to know also what's going on. That I think that's kind of what creates a connection between the people you're following and you, is not just here's my listing, it's in my shop, go check it out. But even if you were to say, oh, I'm starting a new mug today, or I just got my clay, or just things related to what you're doing, I like those kinds of updates, because then it's not just about, okay, see what I'm selling. It's here's my creative process in as I'm going through it, those kinds of things. I like reading those kinds of posts. And yeah, they're short, but that's, and I'm talking about Twitter now, but that's what Twitter is kind of about. It's just, just give me a quick update. My attention span is short. What are you doing? Oh, yay. Okay, you're starting a new mug, and then, however long it takes you to do that. And then I see the listing. It makes sense. I remember when she started it, and now it's done. And I feel a bit more connection to that piece. Yeah. With Facebook, yeah, all this social media, I feel like, there are people who do this for a living, social media managers. And
yeah.
I think just for us regular people that are doing other stuff and trying to handle our own social media, I think it's a lot to handle. And I know that I don't know that I am the best person to give advice, but because I'm struggling too, but we can only try.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that your husband got you an extruder. What's an extruder?
Okay, so it's kind of like, do you remember Play-Doh Play-Doh when we were kids, that little thing that you stick the Play-Doh in and you push it down and something comes out the end? It's kind of like that. An extruder, you put the clay into the barrel of the extruder and you pull the handle down, and depending on the die that you have in it, you can make different shapes. So you could just make, a round coil kind of thing, say if you were coil building, or you can use different shapes to make handles for mugs or things like that. And then there are some hollow dies that I have. So I was able to make a tube. So just like a pasta maker, how you can make the tube pasta.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. So with these flutes, basically you make these round tubes, and then, when they are set up enough to where you can cut holes in them without squishing them, then you cut the holes into it. and that kind of thing. So it was kind of fun, and I carved some little designs in them so that when I do raku them, that they will, have some kind of interest to them too. They're not just, plain.
Yeah. Diane, that got me thinking, and this is probably not even on your radar right now, but have you ever considered making a YouTube video of you doing, like maybe even just what this process you just explained using an extruder and then posting that?
Well, I hadn't really, but that's not a bad idea, is it? Especially now with, iPhones and everything.
Yes.
It's not so difficult to do anymore, is it?
No, it's not that hard to do anymore. And videos, tend to help drive traffic too. And people like watching videos. You can link back to your shop from the video or put the link to your Etsy shop at the end of the video so they know where to go and buy what they just saw you making.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I think I would like to watch that video. As you were describing the process, I was trying to picture it and I just thought I would watch the video.
Oh, well, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll enlist my teenage daughter to help me.
I was going to say that she probably could do it in like under 10 minutes. Well, depends on how long the process takes you. But yeah, she could have that thing on the internet in no time. Probably.
Yeah, no kidding. The kids really just have it down. They're not afraid of this technology at all.
Oh yeah, this world is about them now.
Yep.
So each week, about how much time are you spending on your Etsy shop? How much time does it take?
Well, I haven't really, added it up because it's a lot of little in-between time things, like I said. But it seems like pretty much most of my spare time at home in the evenings is either about making new items, photographing new items, and pretty much I have to do that on the weekends because I photograph my pieces outside and I need the daylight and that sort of thing. And then, in between, as I mentioned, I might have my iPad and be, doing things on the Etsy shop or on the Teams or what have you while watching TV in between glazing pieces. So it's a lot of in between, multitasking in between other things. So probably quite a bit, which probably would bring that profitability down even further if you look at it. But
I know. Yeah, I think most people blend Etsy into the rest of their lives. And so it's kind of hard to separate, to tell exactly what portion of my week is going to Etsy and what, because you blend it into everything else you're doing. It's
yes, absolutely
easy to do. So when you first opened your Etsy shop, did you have any expectations on, with the shop, and have those been met or have you been disappointed?
Well, let's put it this way. Of course, I had no idea what I was doing or what would happen. I just assumed, okay, you post some items, people see them, they buy them, right? I didn't realize how much actual effort went into promoting your shop and making sure that you are seen. And that was probably the biggest shocker for me because I thought, well, people will see it. But there are so many items. Even if you just went to a certain category like ceramics and pottery, there's so much there that it would take a long time for a person to kind of sort through that to find you. So that was probably the hardest part. But since I've engaged in these other social media and Teams and, trying to improve my tags, that's the other thing, the search tags, things have definitely gotten better. And of course, as probably everybody on Etsy has experienced, now that we're in the heart of the Christmas shopping season, things have definitely picked up.
Yes. Oh, and that's good to hear because you want to be busy right now.
Yes.
Yeah. So have there been any times where you've just thought, okay, I'm done with this. It's too much work. It's too much time and effort. I want to quit my Etsy shop, close it up. Never?
Of course. No, I have. I've thought, I haven't sold anything in a month. Oh my God, why am I spending all this time on it? And that's when my husband chirps up and says, come on, you like doing this anyway. That's why we're doing this. It doesn't matter. He goes, we could give it all away. It doesn't matter. Just, So then I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And then I keep doing it.
Yeah. Good. One of the things I like, and people might hear me say this over and over again, is with Etsy. I think it's selling on Etsy is different because you're doing something you enjoy doing anyway, and most people were doing it for free before they got on Etsy. So when you're on Etsy and sales aren't coming, you're like, well, at least I'm still doing my craft.
Yes. And I'll tell you, I have done a couple of craft fairs. And you go and you pack everything up, and especially for me, my pieces are bigger and bulkier and heavier, and you have to pack them with a lot of newspaper or whatever to keep them from chipping and breaking. And so it's a major effort to get to one of those craft fairs. And I have sat through one and sold nothing at all. I know. I mean, it was just the wrong place, wrong time, maybe wrong audience or what have you. So in a way, it's like, gosh, Etsy is so much easier because you don't have to lug all this stuff in and then sit there for the whole day. Things happen when they happen.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have to pay to sell at a craft fair?
You do, yes.
Oh.
And there are a variety of different ways that they may do it. Most of the time, they'll charge you some amount for a booth, and it might be $50. It might be, in one case, the one that I sold nothing at was only $30. So it was one day and $30 that I lost. But usually it's a little something. Some of them will charge you a percentage of your profits, although I haven't done any of those.
Okay.
But yeah, it costs you money. You have to have the pop-up and, all of the tables or, any kind of display items. It's quite a production.
Yeah. Do you think you'll do a craft fair again?
I'm sure that I will. My husband has it in his mind that when we retire, we're going to get a van again and we're going to travel around and we're going to do craft fairs. And he's more of the salesman than I am. So I'm like, okay, fine, you do that. But
maybe he's who you should enlist to help you with those videos and your shop promotion.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you get a new idea for something to make, how long does it take you to get from idea to execution to actually listing it in your store?
It can take a couple of months, actually.
Wow, really?
Really. Part of the reason is because those kilns take a lot of energy, and so you don't want to just run the kiln with a couple of items in it. I really fill them up as much as I possibly can because I want to conserve resources to the greatest extent possible. It's not just about the money. It's just I don't want to waste power. So basically, if I let's say that I was making a tea set, I would have to make enough stuff to fill that kiln, which is, it takes me, even if I'm pushing really hard, it would take me 3 or 4 weeks to make enough stuff to fill the kiln. And then once it's been run and it's bisque fired, then I have to glaze everything. And that takes time too, because you have to put generally, if you're brushing, you have to put 3 layers of glaze on each piece. So you're painting that item 3 times.
Wow.
Now, if you do any kind of intricate painting, then you're painting that intricate design 3 times too. So think about that. It takes time. And then you have to fill that second kiln, to do the glaze firing. So, it usually takes me about 3 or 4 weeks to fill the bisque kiln, and then it takes me usually about 2 weeks to fill a glaze load. So, it's a month and a half about from beginning to end.
Wow. Now, the kilns, when you run them, are you running them for how long does it take to bake? Is baking the right word?
Yeah, it's basically like baking.
Okay.
It depends. So, like the bisque firing goes up to I think it's about 1975 degrees, something like that. And because, it's actually almost like not really a chemical reaction. What is it? Basically, you're changing. It's called quartz inversion. Basically, it takes the clay, and not only does it bake out all of the moisture, but it actually changes the composition of the clay to make it hard. And that is a slower process because if you go too fast, they blow up. And I've had that happen where they just blow up in the kiln and you've got all these shards all over the bottom of your kiln. So that can take, I think, on the slow setting, it takes about 9 hours. And then you have to wait for it to cool off before you can touch it. And that can take another 12 hours to cool off.
Oh, so it's kind of like a slow cooker. You set it and you just let it do its thing for
pretty much. But the glaze loads go faster because, you're not worried about them blowing up. It's pretty much about the glaze doing its thing and running through its process. Mm-hmm. So those usually take, I think, 7 hours for the glaze load. And it actually goes up hotter. I think it's about 2,200 degrees.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, Diane, now I know you have a passion for using reusable pottery.
Yes, I do.
About that.
In fact, this is something that I practice myself a lot. I bring different coffee mugs to work with me every day. And basically, either I fill my coffee mug here, or if I go to the coffee shop, I will bring a reusable mug. Because if you're using paper cups, those paper cups, they are made from trees. And they are not, for the most part, the paper cups may be compostable. Some of them have some kind of coating in them that makes them not compostable. But in any case, they are using a lot of resources. There's a lot of transportation costs. There's a lot of, greenhouse gas emissions that come from just the creation of paper cups. And that's not to say, a lot of coffee shops use styrofoam, which is even worse because that stuff doesn't even break down in the ground. It just stays there forever. And then some of those chemicals actually cause problems in the ecosystem. They create problems for the fish and some of the other creatures that may survive off of the groundwater. So I really believe in using reusable coffee mugs and pottery to the greatest extent possible because the impact of it in the long term is so much better than, using these throwaway things. Now, granted, there are times when you're going to use paper plates or paper cups, but I think to reduce or minimize that and use permanent reusable items to the greatest extent possible is much better for the environment. That's something that I really feel strongly about, is trying to do whatever we can. People may not believe in global warming, fine, but even if you don't believe in global warming, why not conserve resources? Why not conserve water and electricity? And why pollute the planet if you don't need to?
Right. Yeah. I agree. If it's not going to take any, that much, if it takes just a little extra effort on your part, you might as well. Which brings me to your question. Are the mugs and the items you make, are they microwavable and dishwasher safe?
They are. I use my pottery all the time. I put it in the dishwasher. I've never, some of the mugs I've had for, 6 years, and I haven't even noticed any change in the glaze in all those 6 years, and I microwave them all the time. Now, I've had people ask me about heating the teapots on a stove, and I wouldn't recommend doing that, but I have heated teapots in the microwave and had no problems at all.
Okay.
So, yeah, they are very usable for everyday living.
Okay, good. So I'm going to give a plug for Diane's store again. If you do want to try and do your part in helping to protect the environment. Diane has some lovely mugs and bowls and other household items. Her shop is Muddy Waters Ceramic Creations. You can search for it by Muddy Waters CC in Etsy. Diane, do you have any advice for new Etsy sellers or people who are thinking about selling on Etsy but haven't yet taken that jump deep?
Well, yeah, a few things, really. One thing is the photography is really important. And I'm not saying I'm an expert at it by any means, but even when I go and create treasuries of other people's things, there are sometimes that somebody might have a really lovely item, but it doesn't show up well because the photography is too dark or they've got too much busy stuff in the background. So, keep the background simple, keep the lighting good, and try to take the best quality photos you can, because that's really what is going to get your item noticed. Number two, I would say definitely get involved with teams and other community efforts, ways that you can promote your items, and also get to know other people, because sometimes, even through these connections that you make on the teams, you are making friends. And I tell you, I've bought a lot of items from my friend shops because they've said, I'm not selling anything. And I've had people buy from me, not because I've said I'm not selling anything, but just because they've been looking at it and they like it, and we get to know one another. So it's really important to get involved with teams.
Yeah.
But other than that, I still have a lot to learn. So I don't know what else I could offer.
Well, that's valuable information, and especially the part about connecting with people. It's true. People like to buy from people they know and like. So if people get to know you and like you and interact with you on Etsy, if you're selling something that they happen to be looking for one day, it's most likely they're going to go to your shop and buy from you because they know you and they like you. So, yes. Thank you so much, Diane, for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Same here. And thank you for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.